The manga begins, and the very first thing that we see is an engagement ceremony where a young couple takes an oath to maintain purity, dedication, love, and mutual respect. The girl is Sophie Marvel, the eldest daughter of the Count of Marvel from the Kingdom of Bulan, while the boy is Glaris Mizael from the Kingdom of Evergrande. Both of them swear to keep their vows, and with that the Pope announces the official recognition of their engagement in the name of God. He concludes the ceremony with a prayer that this union will finally wipe away the grudges left behind by the horrifying 20-year war and lead to true reconciliation between the two nations. As the couple walks back together, the crowd erupts into cheers and warmly welcomes them. However, despite the joyful atmosphere, Sophie looks hesitant about what may come next in the name of this engagement. Glaris gently assures her that he has sworn to love her regardless of how their engagement came to be, and he promises that he will do everything in his power to keep her happy. His words ease some of the tension on Sophie's face, yet it seems that trouble is not going to settle anytime soon. The moment the door opens, a young man walks inside while glaring at the couple with a menacing smile. Later, inside a shady room, the same young man leans closer and warmly embraces Sophie. While Sophie continues to battle the chaotic thoughts swirling in her mind, she eventually gives in. The young man is the Crown Prince of Evergrande, someone Sophie secretly loves. Her mind drifts back to what had happened earlier between the two of them in that same room, where the Crown Prince had Sophie completely under his control and she was obediently following everything he asked her to do. However, this infidelity falls on poor Glaris like the sky crashing down on him, turning his life completely upside down. On that day, Glaris did not just lose his fiancée. The shocking revelation also cost him his future as the next head of the Duke's house. In the next moment, Glaris finds himself slammed onto the ground while three ominous figures stand above him, delivering his sentence. Their words pierce through his soul as he looks up helplessly. Glaris has been exiled indefinitely, and his destination is not some distant county but the second basement floor of the labyrinth of death. As if that were not enough, his own father has abandoned him and stripped him of his inheritance, meaning there will be no help coming for the young man. When Glaris demands to know his crime, the man grinds his teeth in anger and accuses him of laying his hands on his fiancée and being caught in an act of social misconduct. Apparently, even touching one's own fiancée is enough to be disinherited in this twisted situation. Glaris strongly rejects the accusations, but his protests carry no weight. The man continues explaining that it was the noble crown prince who saved the noble lady from Glaris, who is now being portrayed as nothing more than a demon. The cruel irony is that Glaris cannot defend himself. Whatever the crown prince claims will automatically be accepted as the truth because it comes from royal authority. Furious, Glaris lashes out and declares that he will never accept this nonsense. He openly accuses the royal family of fabricating the entire story against him and vows that he will bring them before justice and prove his innocence to the world. The man standing before him simply mocks him and tells him to try if he can. But first, he must survive the second basement floor of the labyrinth of death. The place is even more terrifying than its name suggests. Skeletons are scattered everywhere, and the atmosphere alone feels suffocating. The punishment may be called exile, but it does not take Glaris long to realize that it is nothing more than a death sentence wrapped in soft words. This dungeon lies in the northeastern region of the kingdom and is known as the most dangerous dungeon in the entire land. Its difficulty is considered world-class, and no one has ever managed to clear it. There is also an old myth that somewhere deep within the dungeon sleeps a mysterious power capable of granting unimaginable strength. Many adventurers have tried to reach it, but the chances of an entire party returning alive are practically zero. Even in his wildest dreams, Glaris never imagined that he would be thrown into this dungeon, and that too without a weapon. At the moment, he is nothing more than a helpless sitting duck. He is terrified, shattered, and heartbroken. Sophie betrayed him in the worst way possible. Even though their engagement had been arranged, he had still grown to love her sincerely. Yet the smiles in her eyes and her gentle gestures now leave him wondering if everything had been nothing but a lie. At that moment, Glaris makes a decision. He will not die so easily. He must survive, not only to bring the crown prince and his followers to justice but also to fulfill the oath he made earlier. Using magic, he manages to break the rope tying his hands behind his back. He knows that he must climb the dungeon floors to reach the surface, but each level is said to be as large as an entire city. Wandering aimlessly will only leave him starving, and an exhausted Glaris would become the perfect meal for the monsters lurking in the labyrinth. As he searches the surroundings, a foul smell suddenly reaches his nose. Looking around for the source, he notices a corpse lying nearby. The body looks as if it has been burned by acid, which means an acidic monster must be roaming this floor. The thought alone sends chills down his spine. In most dungeons, the first floor usually contains weak monsters. Now Glaris finally understands why this place is called the Labyrinth of Death. Carefully following the strange sounds nearby, he moves closer in hopes of gathering some information about the creatures living here. However, the sight before him sends a shiver down his spine. Standing before him is a giant slime filled with glowing green acidic fluid capable of turning humans or monsters into ash in an instant. It is a special type of beast that covers its body with an acidic shell, making it almost impossible to attack. Even among monsters, creatures like this are feared by their own kind. Glarus has to retreat, but what lies behind him is a dead end, and on the other side stands the giant green monster. It looks like the end of his story. His mind rushes back to the moments he shared with Sophie. Their engagement had seemed perfect, not only for them but for the people as well, because it had the potential to stop the war and save countless lives. He had even vowed that one day he would support the administration from the shadows and help build a country where everyone could live safely. Those memories and the promises he once made inject a sudden strength into his hands, and he swings his sword at the slime. However, the blade simply slips off its body, proving that physical attacks are useless against it. At that moment, he suddenly hears a voice inside his head, and the already agitated Glarus becomes even more confused as the strange voice echoes in his mind. The voice tells him to understand his opponent, and only then will the labyrinth guide him toward its hidden powers. Poor Glarus cannot make sense of what is happening to his life. His fiancée has already abandoned him for the crown prince and left him to rot in this dungeon. Now he is facing a slime with no visible weakness, and on top of that there is this mysterious voice inside his head. Glarus wonders if this might be the so-called voice of all things, and why such strange events are happening only to him. As these thoughts swirl in his mind, memories from the past begin flooding in. The voice accuses Glarus of failing to protect his companions and reminds him that his decision to move forward and defeat the Tenma had cost them dearly. But then Glarus realizes that these are not his memories at all. They are the painful memories of the giant monster before him, a creature abandoned by its own kind, just like Glarus himself. The monster has been left alone for so long, carrying the same loneliness that Glarus now feels. Glarus apologizes to the giant slime for misjudging it and asks if it can understand his word. That simple act ends up saving his life, because in the world of slimes anyone who can communicate with them is considered a friend. Such people are immediately spared. Although they are not speaking directly and are instead communicating through telepathy, the slime asks Glarus how he is able to understand their language. Out of all the strange things happening around him, Glarus honestly has no idea how this is possible. Just a moment ago the slime looked terrifying, but now it behaves like an innocent child. The slime asks whether Glarus has come here all alone, and when Glarus reveals that he was thrown into this place, the slime offers to show him a path that leads upstairs. For a moment Glarus cannot believe his luck. However, he quickly abandons the idea. Outside the dungeon, things are far worse for him. Since the Crown Prince was the one who threw him into the dungeon, there is a strong chance that his agents are still waiting outside to make sure Glarus never comes out alive. The slime asks if he truly has no interest in leaving such a dangerous place. When Glarus decides to stay, the slime becomes surprisingly happy because it will finally have someone to talk to in this boring and lonely place. Taking advantage of the moment, Glarus offers the slime a partnership, essentially asking it to shelter him from the dangers of the labyrinth. The slime suddenly rises up, making it seem as if it is about to attack Glarus. However, it turns out the slime is simply leaning forward to hug him as a sign of affection, and surprisingly Glarus does not get hurt. The slime explains that its body only secretes acid when facing enemies. Even though the hug does not harm him, it still scares the hell out of Glarus. Their first proper interaction begins with learning each other's names. The slime reveals that names do not exist in their world, so Glarus decides to give it one. He calls the slime Sura, and the creature happily accepts the name. With that, Glarus climbs onto his new friend and asks if it knows any place nearby where they can find food and water. Sura does know where to find water, but it is not sure about the food. Glarus asks if it can show him the place where some beast-type monsters live so they can hunt them for food. Sura points toward a brick in the wall, and when Glarus pushes it, the sight on the other side shocks him. There lies a countless amount of treasure, far more than anything he has ever seen in his life. Glarus is over the moon, thinking that he can not only buy food from this treasure but also use it to maximize his wealth once he finally gets out of the labyrinth. The poor guy does not realize that the place is actually filled with traps. However, Sura is strong enough to endure any trap, and it offers to go inside and bring him anything he desires. While Glarus worries that Sura might get hurt, Sura sweeps through the room with ease. But the poor guy does not know that his expectations are about to crash. Inside the boxes are not coins of gold and silver but monsters. This is when Glarus realizes that he can understand the language of the monsters in this labyrinth, not just Sura, but the other monsters as well. He remembers learning that mimics are monsters that even B-rank hunters struggle to deal with, but for Sura they are nothing more than a quick swipe. Since he can understand the language of monsters, Glarus becomes confident that he will not have many enemies here. However, he thinks this out loud, and Sura quickly reminds him that it can hear everything he is blabbering about. Once they deal with the mimics, Glarus cannot wait to see what lies inside the boxes and eagerly asks Sura to open the treasures somewhere safe. Sura invites Glarus to its own place, and Glarus has no problem following him since Sura can provide everything he needs: shelter, safety, and food. Sura lives in a chamber with clear water and enough space for the giant creature to move comfortably. All it needs is water to stay alive, and this room has an endless supply of clean water. Now that Glarus has settled down and most of his anxiety has faded away, he asks Sura to keep watch while he takes a nap. Sura gently wraps itself around Glarus to protect him from the cold. Life can be strange sometimes. Coming to this place filled Glarus with fear and strange thoughts. He believed that this day would be the worst day of his already miserable life. Yet meeting Sura has completely changed things for him. With those thoughts in mind, he slowly drifts to sleep, wondering what his fiancée would think if she saw him opening treasure boxes inside a labyrinth. The next day, the two friends walk through the corridors of the labyrinth while hunting monster rabbits for food. Glarus's shots are so accurate that Sura cannot stop itself from asking whether he used to be a monster hunter. Glarus replies that he has only hunted animals in forests before and has no real experience hunting monsters. The two soon return to their place because Glarus is starving and eager to feast on their catch. Earlier that day, they had searched through the remains of fallen adventurers to find anything useful and managed to collect a few materials along with a bow. Even so, Glarus still does not consider himself a professional hunter. Glarus begins cleaning the rabbits and shows Sura the way food is prepared on Earth, starting from cleaning the animal to roughly butchering the meat for cooking. Glarus begins to settle into life inside the dungeon, and at the moment he cannot wait for the potato harvest. He had found the seeds in a treasure chest along with a magic stone that acts like the sun and provides the essential light needed for growing vegetables. The person who left the manual had carefully written everything about how to turn the seeds into proper food. The scent of the cooking food attracts other animals in the dungeon as well, but thankfully none of them can enter the sanctuary without Sura's permission. This is all because of the special stones they found in the treasure. Glarus strangles a boar and drags it inside, but this time they decide to cook it differently. Glarus sprinkles salt over the meat and leaves it out to dry. His skill in cooking is so impressive that even Sura cannot help asking how a young man like him knows so much about preparing food. Glarus believes it is all thanks to the adventurers who lost their lives in the dungeon. From their remains, he found seasonings, utensils, and other useful items. After carefully flipping and cooking the meat for a while, the meal is finally ready. Although it may not be the most nutritious meal, it is still far better than starving. After finishing the meal, Sura asks what Glarus plans to do next. Glarus asks Sura to guide him around the area because he wants to map the surroundings. Even though he technically does not need a map with Sura beside him, Glarus has something bigger in mind. Maps of this place are almost non-existent, and he knows they could be sold for more than gold. While they are exploring the area, Sura suddenly hears a voice nearby. It sounds like something non-human dragging its injured body across the ground. To their surprise, it turns out to be an old human adventurer who becomes terrified upon seeing a green slime. However, Glarus quickly assures him that Sura will not attack him because Sura is his companion, and adventurers must not harm him either. The old man has sustained serious injuries and soon collapses before Glarus. Glarus takes a closer look and realizes that if the wounds are not treated quickly, the man may die from blood loss. However, saving him would require using the precious herbs that Glarus has been keeping for himself. If he uses them on the old man, he will be left with no life-saving herbs of his own. Glarus does not want to hesitate, but Sura believes the wiser choice would be either to kill the adventurer or let him die from his wounds. After all, they are in the labyrinth of death, and Glarus himself was betrayed by his own kind. Both he and Sura have suffered betrayal from their own people. Still, Glarus finds himself in a difficult situation. He does not want to let the man die without help. But if he saves the adventurer and allows him to leave the dungeon, it will reveal the secret that Glarus is still alive. The news might eventually reach the crown prince, the very man who abandoned him here to rot. Even with all these fears in his mind, Glarus still wants to remain human, a kind soul who helps others. So he decides to carry the injured man back to the sanctuary. Sura cannot help but admire Glarus's kindness, and this compassion has slowly made Sura kinder toward others of his kind as well. With that, Glarus activates the teleport crystal. However, he does not realize that someone has been secretly watching him, someone who cannot wait to report to the Intelligence Bureau that the sinner exiled to the labyrinth is still very much alive. The old geezer has news that feels like a treasure to him, and he believes that the crown prince might personally ask him to get rid of the exiled one. It is not just Glarus that he holds a grudge against. He also hates the slimes roaming around the dungeon. He uses magic detection to track down Glarus, but it shocks him how fast they are moving through the dungeon. Before he can even blink, Glarus bumps right into him and fires a few arrows his way. Glarus has coated the arrows with Sura's liquid, which leaves a person crippled for a while. The old magician falls to his knees before Glarus, who immediately begins interrogating him. Glarus demands to know why he wanted to harm them and whether the goblins they faced earlier were also his doing. He warns the old magician to speak the truth or face the consequences. The old geezer finally explains that he secretly works for the Evergrande Kingdom's Intelligence Bureau in exchange for precious magic stones. He is a high-level magic monster capable of using magic to understand human language and even converse with humans. He has been tasked with keeping watch for Glarus, and if he finds him alive, he is allowed to eliminate Glarus and keep all of his belongings for himself. Sura asks what they should do with the monster and whether they should simply kill him. Seeing his death right before his eyes, the magic monster, who goes by the name Marin, begs for his life and promises to do anything they want. Glarus decides to turn the situation around on the Crown Prince and orders Marin to falsely claim that Glarus died in the dungeon. To support the story, Glarus plans to give him the Dukas family's heirloom ring along with some human remains as proof. With such evidence, no one would think of doubting him. With this plan, Glarus hopes to use the information from Marin to deceive the Intelligence Bureau, gather the proof he needs to expose their tyranny to the world, and eventually reunite with his family with his head held high. Back in the girls' dormitory of the Royal Capital Noble Academy, Natalie walks through the corridor while thinking about Senior Glarus. It has been a week since his exile. The incident has sparked many rumors. Some say that Sophie has been detained by the Intelligence Bureau because she was assaulted by her fiancé. However, as much as Natalie knows Glarus, she is certain that her senpai could never do such a thing. There are also growing rumors about Sophie's infidelity with the Crown Prince and that the assault story was fabricated to throw Glarus away. Despite all these rumors, Natalie has known both of them for long enough that she finds it difficult to believe Sophie could be so cruel. She decides that the best way is to ask Sophie directly. Natalie is welcomed inside by Sophie, and she immediately raises her question about the whereabouts of Glarus. Natalie has always admired Sophie and once wished to become like her, a high-ranking noble from the Kingdom of Boulogne. Natalie always considered herself no match for Sophie, which is why she kept her feelings to herself. Moreover, her father left Natalie with little political power after his early passing, even though she is the only daughter of a viscount. However, despite all the gratitude she once felt for Sophie, all Natalie can now see is someone who betrayed her own fiancé. Sophie can no longer hide her guilt. When Natalie corners her with questions, Sophie finally blurts out the truth and admits that it was she who broke the vow of purity. Natalie lashes out at her for being so careless with another person's feelings. In response, Sophie explodes emotionally, saying that she has long endured the pain of being looked down upon by others. Although Glarus was kind and would have loved her for the rest of his life, she cannot change the fact that she comes from a defeated country. No matter how kindly others treated her, she always felt suffocated by that reality. The Crown Prince noticed her vulnerability and approached her, showing her a dream of becoming the princess of the Evergrande Kingdom. Natalie cannot tolerate this nonsense any longer, and in her agony she slaps Sophie across the face. She leaves Sophie standing by the door and declares that she will never stop searching for Glarus. She also warns that the unfaithful Sophie must never come near Glarus again. Sophie breaks down in tears, apologizing to Natalie and to Glarus. Deep inside, she wishes that if Glarus could see the guilt in her eyes, the kind man he is might still forgive her. After Natalie leaves, the Crown Prince comes looking for Sophie. However, Sophie asks him to leave her alone for the day. The Crown Prince, however, has come to bring her some news. It does not take more than a brief glance for Sophie to recognize the ring that has been passed down through the generations of the Mazale heirs, along with the fragments that came with it. They all belong to Glarus, and this can only mean that Glarus is no more. The Crown Prince fabricates a story, saying that they found the ring in the West Forest and that the body had been burned beyond recognition. Sophie cannot bear the shock, and just as she is about to scream at the top of her lungs, the Crown Prince covers her mouth. He tells Sophie that she should be happy instead, since they have taken care of an inconvenience. Although guilt begins to eat her from the inside, the desire to become a princess slowly overcomes her grief over Glarus's death. The prince continues to lure her with his words, and soon Sophie's eyes light up at the thought of what awaits her. She seals her lips in silent agreement. Meanwhile, back inside the labyrinth, Sura and Glarus now have a new teammate, Marin, who has helped them move through the third floor with surprising ease. Although Marin is not willing to team up with them willingly, he is forced into cooperation because of the magic stones. Marin has been bound with a promise magic stone, a special stone that strikes any traitor with light magic. This light magic is fatal to monsters in the labyrinth, and now Marin is forced by the power of the stone to obey Glarus. Glarus now sets his sights on the fourth floor, and from this point onward, the labyrinth will become much more dangerous. Even Sura warns him that the fourth floor is home to a headless monster that feeds on humans. Since it is a headless knight, Glarus's arrows will not be very effective, and Sura suggests that they should return another time. However, Glarus intends to push through the fourth floor using the teleportation stone he possesses. For this, he needs assistance from Marin, who hesitates at first, but the magic stone compels him to cooperate. As soon as they enter the 4th floor, the knight charges toward them. Marin quickly casts fire magic to push it back, but the knight cuts straight through the flames. Next, Sura steps forward to fight, yet even he is no match for the knight. Realizing the danger, Glarus shouts for a retreat. He activates the teleportation stone, and the 3 of them return safely to the sanctuary. The 3 safely make it back to the sanctuary, and Glarus realizes that he will need to prepare differently for level 4. But before that, they must eat something, and with that Glarus begins chopping the vegetables. Their stock of food looks healthy, and they have enough salt, so they can use it without any worry of running out. From beans to peppers and different seasonings, Glarus soon prepares a delicious meat dish for the team. They plan their strategy during the meal. Although they could not defeat the monster, Marin is still sure that the creature is no match for his top-tier magic. If Glarus and Sura can buy him some time, he believes he can take care of the headless monster with his magic. However, because of the magic's force, the passage will also collapse. But the real challenge is the monster's undead nature. Even if they kill him, he will still rise again. Glarus needs to think of a solution to get past this beast, so he asks Marin about the type of monster Dullahans are and whether they can understand human language. Marin explains that, unlike creatures born as animals, monsters, or demons, Dullahans are actually lost humans who entered the dungeon and became trapped in the labyrinth forever. Even if someone becomes undead, there is still a limit to how many times they can resurrect. As far as Marin knows, this knight has been resurrecting for decades, and his soul is trapped by a deep grudge against the world. Glarus realizes that the knight is struggling with an eternal pain of the heart that remains even after death. He wonders what could have caused such resentment and regret. He then discusses the possibility of freezing the knight, but Marin is unsure about it since there is not enough moisture in the air. However, Glarus soon shocks both Marin and Sura when he announces that he plans to make the headless knight his ally. Soon they return to the floor again, and the Dullahan lashes out at Glarus in an attempt to kill him. Marin and Sura quickly team up and trap the headless knight. Now that the Dullahan is restrained, Glarus insists that they should talk. He confronts the knight, asking why he resents humans so much when he himself used to be one, and why he now wants to kill his own race. Using his power, Glarus listens to the Dullahan's thoughts and begins to learn about his past. The Dullahan had first entered the labyrinth with his allies, and together they managed to reach the 15th floor. While roaming through that floor, they were discussing their plan to kill the dragon that lived there. Since it was a direct wish from the king, they believed that accomplishing it would make them the new heroes of the world.